Hi, everybody, and welcome to Drop In with Marianne. I am really happy to see you today, and I hope you are enjoying this weird COVID summer and you're keeping healthy. So, today we are going to be looking at Subject Verb Agreement. But first, I would like to say who I am. In case you haven't seen this before, I am Marianne with Drop In with Marianne, and this is Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. So welcome. If you have any grammar questions or anything you'd like me to cover on this show, please send us an email at the link that will be provided for you. And you can ask us any kind of grammar question, and I would be happy to talk about it on the air with you. And so what that means is every day I'm getting emails asking me grammar questions, and I love this because then I have the opportunity to help students improve their grammar and improve their communication skills, because really that's what this is all about. That's why you're studying a new language. So in Drop In with Marianne, so far we have covered some modals, articles, we have covered, count and non-count nouns. We've covered things that are basic, and we've covered things that get a little bit more tricky. And that's kind of where we're headed today. Today we're going to talk about subject verb agreement. Now, don't let the title scare you. The subject of a sentence has to agree with the verb in the sentence. That's why it's called subject verb agreement. Now, you might be saying, well, what's a subject? And I'm glad you asked. A subject is what the sentence is about, or who does the action in the sentence. That's the subject of the sentence. What's the verb? The verb is the action word. Now, it doesn't always have to be an action, but a verb is generally considered an action word. And so what we're going to look at today is subject-verb agreement and why these two have to agree. Why do they have to agree with each other? And is it okay if they don't agree? No. If they don't agree, you will lose marks in class. And so that's why I think this is important. And you know, when I'm teaching subject-verb agreement, my students always answer correctly when we're having the conversation about how to use it. They always answer the questions. They always say they understand and they know how to do it. But then why do so many students mess up subject-verb agreement? I mean, not just low level, I mean high levels also. Is it that tricky? Well, it can be. And part of the reason why it can be is because of count and non-count nouns, because of verbs, because of auxiliary verbs and modal auxiliaries. I mean, there are lots of different kinds of verbs. So if I give you an example of he jumps, well, of course you're going to get that right, because he is the subject, very easy. Jumps is a very easy verb, and this sentence consists of two words. But what about when it starts to get a little bit more difficult? That's when it gets tricky. Now, I want to show you my magic board here. I hope you can see. He, she, it, verb with S. If you remember that, you will get the correct answer every time. He, she, it, verb S. Now let's go up. You, they, we, I, verb, no S. No S. You, they, we, I, no S. Now, I know we have practiced this before, but I want to do a few examples. She drives to Toronto on Saturdays. She drives. We have our subject, we have our verb. If we use he, she, and it, remember, the verb must have an S. Can I say, it drink water? No, it drinks water. Now, this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because if the subject in your sentence is he, she, it, you, they, we, I, you're going to get that correct, because that's fairly simple. But what about when it gets a little bit trickier? For example, what about when we use the connector and? Well, Jane and John went to the store. Now, went is past tense. Can we change that to went? No. Now, this is the example of when it gets tricky, because the verb to go in the past tense, of course, does not get an S. But what about go and goes? Jane and John go to the store. We're talking present tense here. Jane and John go to the store. Now, why is it go? Because Jane and John are two people. Two people becomes they. Where am I? They. Jane and John becomes they. They go. No S. Now, what if I said Jane? Janie goes to the store. Then you would put an S, because it is he, she, or it. Janie is a she. Johnny is a he. He goes to the store. So when you use your connector and, you are making a he, a she, or an it a they. So let's use another example. The cat and dog run around the yard. The cat and the dog run around the yard. Now, why don't I say runs? Because the cat and the dog become they. Now, what about or? Well, or changes everything, because we are doing one or the other, not both. When you use and, you are connecting. You are making a he, she, it, a they. But when you use or, you are keeping them singular. You are keeping them individual. So I might say, Janie or Johnny will walk the dog later. Janie or Johnny will walk the dog later. Now, will is future. It's also a modal used in certain situations. There's no S. So remember, modal, base form of the verb. We went over this yesterday, and I'll recap later. But let's go to Johnny and Janie walk the dog. Johnny or Janie walks the dog. When I use the word or, I keep it separate. I keep it one and one. When I say and, I connect, and I make Johnny and Janie a they. Johnny or Janie walk the dog. We don't say walk with or. Johnny or Janie walks the dog. We must remember that, you guys. That is a very tricky one, and sometimes it can be a little bit more complicated. Now, moving on to nouns. Now, we talked about count and non-count nouns a little while ago, and maybe some of you remember. Now, this also can be a little bit tricky with subject verb agreement. For example, the word team. Team. What is a team? Well, a team is like a group. A team is a group of people that make up one unit. A team is one unit that is made up about or made up from many different people. If you look at a basketball team, you maybe have 15 people on that team. Those 15 people are all one individually, but as a team, it becomes a group. It becomes one thing. So when we're saying the word team, we have to use the singular form of the verb with S. The team eats a lot of food every day. The team eats a lot of food every day. We wouldn't say the team eat because the team is one unit. Now, what about if I have more than one team? Then I would make it plural. The teams eat a lot every day. Do you see how it works? If it is a singular with he, she, or it, and a team is an it, then we put an S on the end of the verb. If it is more than one, as in they, you, we, then we don't have the S. Now, you is also tricky because you can be all of you, or it can be just you. And either way, we don't change that. Either way, the word you still has no S. Now, what about I? I is just one. Do I put an S? No. I and you are a little bit special. So you will have to remember that, you guys, because there's no real rule or formula that I can tell you. You just have to remember I and you have no S on the verb. But moving on, let's look back at group. Group is one unit. What is another one that is made up of many people but is one unit? Well, that could be group. The group drinks a case of water every game. The group drinks a case of water every game. Now, a group can consist of any amount of people as long as it's over one. So really, a group is just like a team, but it's one unit. Government. That's a good example. It consists of many people and many different divisions, but it's one government. It is one unit, and so we use it like a singular. We put an S on the end of the verb. The government calls a meeting every Tuesday. The government calls a meeting every Tuesday. We wouldn't say the government call. The government calls. Anything that is one unit gets an S on the end of the verb. Now let's go back to singular and plural because there are many words that confuse students. For example, advice. Is advice count or non-count? It's non-count. That's a non-count noun. Now, what about homework? Homework is also a non-count noun. Would I say, homework, give me a headache? No. Homework gives me a headache. Why gives? Because homework is an it. It is a non-count noun that counts as an it. Well, what about advice? Advice is non-count. Advice is good for you sometimes. Advice is good for you sometimes. Advice is non-count. So with non-count, we use is. It's a singular in the sentence. So remember, even though verb plus S, when we talk about is also ends in an S, and that's a good way for you to remember. Are does not end in an S, and so that's a good way to remember to use are with you, they, and we. But of course, I does not use is or are. What does I use? Am, because I am special. Huh? Now, if we are looking at plural and singular, that takes practice. And I told you guys that before when we went over that last week. Now, the best way to recognize singular and plural could be an S on the end of a noun. But not always, because some nouns don't get an S. Some nouns are irregular. And also, some nouns just confuse students a lot. So reading is a good way to keep recognizing these words. Another word we could use in an example is furniture. Furniture. This furniture is so comfortable. This furniture is so comfortable. What is furniture? It is a unit. It is made up of one. Furniture is couch or sofa, chair, table, fireplace, dresser, wardrobe. Furniture is what we put in our home to make our lives more comfortable. So use furniture in the singular way because furniture is non-count. We can never make it a count noun. And when you are using furniture or any of those non-count nouns as a subject, then your verb must match that subject. That's called subject verb agreement, and that is super important. Now, I mentioned modals. We talked about modals the last couple of days, and a modal is an auxiliary. You remember, we always have the modal plus the base form of the verb. That doesn't change. I wouldn't say he should thinks about his homework. I would say he should think about his homework. Even though I use he, should gets the base form of the verb. And the base form of the verb has no S, no ED, whatever. It has no S. So he should think about his homework. That's an example that I think you can all relate to. When you are using a modal, don't put an S on the verb, even if you are using a he, she, or it. Okay? Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is important when we are doing this kind of work, look for the subject and the verb in your sentence. When you are reading a sentence or writing a sentence, look for the subject and the verb. If you're reading in a book or an essay or a journal article, look for the nouns, look for the verbs, and most importantly, when we're talking about subject verb agreement, look for the subject, because the subject and the verb must match. If you're reading something and it's a little bit difficult, you will know if this subject is plural or singular. You'll know if it's count or non-count by the verb. If the verb has an S, we know it's a singular. If the verb has no S, we know it's more than one or non-count. Now, what about I? I go. No S. I eat dinner at 5 o'clock. No S. When I was little, was what? Well, again, remember past tense. We have to be careful. When I was little, it's the past tense of is. But in this kind of sentence, it has a different structure, right? So now let's look at I in a sentence. I drive my car to Shoppers every afternoon. I drive. That means no S. You, they, we, and I, no S. He, she, it has an S. Well, I hope this helped you guys figure out a little bit about subject-verb agreement. And I hope that when we finish doing this show, you go and practice. Remember, talk to people, read novels, read interesting books. Reading is key, and it's a great habit to start during COVID. If you have any grammar questions, please send me an email at the email address below. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube, and here at Brock University, we say keep healthy, stay safe, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!